Snow drifted through the broken skylight, falling onto William Hayes' worn duffel bag. He sat on the concrete floor of a storage unit he'd just bought with his last $60. Dust, mildew, and silence were all he got in return. Duke, his loyal German shepherd, sniffed the shadows with restless energy. William rubbed his temples, fighting the cold and the ache behind his eyes. "Guess it's just junk, boy," he muttered. But Duke didn't move. The dog's claws scraped at the back wall, slow, deliberate, and almost rhythmic. William frowned. He stood, his breath a faint ghost in the air, and ran his hand along the plywood. The seams weren't natural. A quick pry with a rusted crowbar, and the wall gave way. Behind it, a faded envelope sealed with red wax, a small wooden box, and a black case with twin locks. He froze. "Duke," he whispered, "what the hell did we just find?" Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The morning after the discovery, the city looked carved out of steel and frost. Pittsburgh's skyline shimmered under pale winter light, the kind that made everything appear clean while hiding the grime underneath. William Hayes moved through it like a ghost. The duffel bag slung over his shoulder held everything that mattered now: an envelope sealed in red wax, a wooden box, and the locked metal case. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard the echo of the crowbar hitting wood, the sigh of air escaping that hidden wall, the whisper of something old waking up. Duke padded beside him, breath puffing white in the cold. The dog's steady gait was the only rhythm that kept William anchored to the moment. He found a bench near the river and sat. The letter burned in his pocket. He'd promised himself he wouldn't open it again until he figured out where to go next, but curiosity gnawed at him like hunger. He unfolded the paper anyway. "If you are reading this, then I am gone. What you hold here is the truth that cost my brother his life." That line replayed in his mind until the words felt alive. Truth. Cost. Brother. They were fragments of a riddle, and William needed them to mean something. Because if they didn't, if all this was just coincidence, then he'd spent his last dollar chasing ghosts. Duke whined, his ears twitching at the sound of a distant train horn. William glanced down and smiled weakly. "You hungry, partner?" The dog tilted his head as if to say always. William reached into his coat pocket, broke his last protein bar in half, and handed the bigger piece to Duke. He ate the smaller half slowly, trying not to think about tomorrow. A garbage truck roared past, shaking the ground. The noise jolted William back to another place, another vibration, the concussive thud of mortar fire in Kandahar. He saw flashes of sand, the screaming metal of a convoy ripped apart. He smelled blood and burning oil. His pulse spiked, his breath caught. He clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. "Hey, you okay, man?" A passerby's voice snapped him out of it. William blinked, forced a nod, and muttered, "Yeah, just cold." He wasn't cold. He was haunted. That night, he found shelter behind an old freight warehouse. A group of regulars, other homeless vets, sat around a barrel fire, trading stories that blurred the line between truth and survival instinct. William didn't join them. He crouched in the shadows, his mind circling back to the same name, Captain Arthur Langley. Langley had been more than a commander. He'd been a believer, one of those rare officers who treated soldiers like people instead of pieces on a chessboard. When Langley died, the official report said mechanical failure during transport. But everyone in William's unit knew better. The mission had gone sideways because of bad intel, and someone up the chain had buried the evidence. William tried to speak up. The army called him unstable. His discharge came 6 weeks later. He thought he'd left that nightmare buried. But the letter said otherwise. The next morning brought a brittle kind of sunlight. William walked miles until he reached a part of town he hadn't seen in years. Small houses leaning against each other, yards fenced with rusted wire. One of them belonged to Maggie Riley, the widow of Sergeant Dean Riley, William's best friend and the man who'd saved his life the night of the ambush. He hesitated at her gate, feeling like a trespasser in his own past. Duke nudged his leg, urging him forward. William knocked once. Twice. The door opened a crack, revealing a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and silver at her temples. She froze when she saw him. William. Her voice broke. My God. I thought you were dead. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not yet. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she stepped aside. Come in before you freeze. The warmth of her kitchen felt like another world. Yellow light, the smell of coffee, the hum of an old refrigerator. Duke curled up near the door, content. William sat at the table, hands clasped like a man awaiting judgment. You look different, Maggie said softly. Life'll do that. She poured 2 mugs and slid one toward him. So why are you here? He placed the envelope on the table. Because of this. Maggie's fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the handwriting, and the color drained from her face. Langley, she whispered. He tried to warn Dean before that mission. Dean said he was being paranoid. William leaned forward. What if he wasn't? Her gaze lifted to his. The years of grief hardened into focus. Then whoever silenced him, silenced my husband too. They sat in silence, the coffee cooling between them. Finally, Maggie stood. Follow me. She led him into the living room. The walls were lined with photos. Dean in uniform, Dean holding a newborn, Dean laughing with other soldiers. She stopped at one picture, a squad of 7 men in desert camo, all younger, all smiling. Langley stood in the center. Maggie pointed at a man near the edge. That's Private Collins. After the funeral, he came here. Said something about Langley keeping insurance. I thought he meant money. She frowned. Maybe he meant proof. Where is Collins now? William asked. Disappeared 6 months after discharge. No forwarding address. William exhaled slowly. Then we start there. Maggie looked uncertain. Start what exactly? Finishing what Langley couldn't. That night, William laid awake on her couch, Duke's steady breathing filling the quiet. The letter sat on the coffee table, its red wax seal now broken but still glinting in the lamplight. He traced the edges of the paper with a calloused finger, thinking about the road ahead. He didn't have much. No money, no allies, no certainty. But for the first time in years, he had purpose. It was faint, fragile, but real, like a flame trying to survive in the wind. He glanced at Duke. We're in this now, buddy, he murmured. All the way. Outside, a police siren wailed and faded. Somewhere in the city, someone locked a door. William closed his eyes, feeling the weight of memory settle into resolve. In the dim light, the old scars on his hands looked like maps, routes carved by pain, leading him back towards something he hadn't felt in a long time: meaning. 2 days later, William and Duke stood outside an old veterans assistance office on the edge of downtown Pittsburgh. The sign above the door was cracked, the paint peeling from years of neglect: Brotherhood Resource Center, for those who served. Maggie had insisted he come here. If anyone still keeps tabs on discharged soldiers, it's them, she'd said. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and old carpet. A handful of men gathered around a television, watching the muted glow of a sports channel. William moved to the front desk where a woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes looked up from a stack of forms. Name: William Hayes. She typed into a computer, the keys clacking like a metronome. Her brow furrowed. You served in the 113th Infantry, Afghanistan. Discharged. 2011. Medical and disciplinary. Yeah, he said quietly. Her gaze softened. What are you looking for, Mr. Hayes? An old squadmate, Private James Collins. Served under Captain Arthur Langley. That name changed her expression. She sat up straighter, lowering her voice. Langley. Haven't heard that name in years. You sure you want to dig there? William met her eyes. I don't have a choice. She hesitated, then printed something from her computer and slid it toward him. It was a faded contact sheet, partial address, last known employer, and one handwritten note: Collins relocated, no forwarding, possibly working security. Try the old freight yard on 23rd, she said. Private security gigs. Some of the vets end up there. But be careful. Not everyone who left the service left the war behind. William thanked her. As he turned to leave, she called after him, Whatever you're chasing, make sure it's worth finding. He didn't answer. The freight yard was a sprawl of rusted containers and chain-link fences. Men in heavy coats smoked cigarettes near floodlights, guarding nothing in particular. Duke stayed close, his ears pricked. William found a trailer marked Security Office. He knocked twice. A voice growled from inside. We're closed. James Collins. The door opened halfway, revealing a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, eyes bloodshot, beard streaked with gray. He froze when he saw William. I'll be damned, Collins muttered. Hayes. Thought you went under after the inquiry. Not yet, William said. Collins glanced at Duke, then back at him. You alone. Always. Then come in. But keep the dog close. The trailer smelled of stale beer and gun oil. Maps and maintenance logs covered the walls. William's eyes went straight to a photo tacked near the door, their old unit, all of them smiling before everything went wrong. You still got that? He asked. Collins poured 2 whiskeys and handed one over. Some memories refuse to die. What brings you back from the grave? William placed the letter on the table. Collins stared at the signature. His jaw tightened. Langley. He mentioned you, William said. Something about insurance. Collins' hand trembled as he reached for a cigarette. You weren't supposed to find that. Find what? The proof. The files Langley collected before the ambush. He said if anything happened to him, it'd all go public. But the day after he died, his apartment burned down. They said it was faulty wiring. Collins exhaled smoke slowly. Wasn't wiring. It was cleanup. William leaned forward. Cleanup by who? Black Arrow Logistics, Collins said. Private military contractor. Langley found out they'd been funneling stolen U.S. weapons through civilian routes. Our convoy in Kandahar was a cover. When he tried to report it, command buried the whole thing. They took his life. And yours. Silence filled the trailer. Outside, the wind howled across the yard. William's voice dropped. Why didn't you say anything? I did, Collins said bitterly. They came after me. 2 men in suits, no names. Told me to disappear or end up like Langley. So I disappeared. William reached into his duffel and placed the black metal case on the table. Then explained why this was hidden behind a wall in an abandoned storage unit. Collins stared at it like he'd seen a ghost. You have it. The box. You know what's in it. Collins nodded slowly. Evidence. Contracts. Transaction logs. Recordings. Enough to ruin a few powerful men. Then help me open it. Collins hesitated, torn between fear and relief. You don't understand, Hayes. The moment that box opens, someone out there will know. They watch for this. William's eyes hardened. Let them. Collins took a deep breath. There's a code. Langley's birthday, reversed. He told me once, like a joke. William entered the numbers. August 14th, 1965, 561408. The locks clicked open with a sound that filled the room. Inside lay exactly what Collins had described. Classified documents stamped confidential, a handful of cassette tapes, and a small flash drive marked Op Helios. Collins' face went pale. That file, it's the key. Everything we suspected is in there. The mission logs, the payment chains, proof that the brass sold out their own men. Before William could respond, Duke stiffened, ears back, growling at the window. Headlights glared through the blinds. A black SUV idled outside. Collins swore. They found you. Who? Black Arrow. They never stopped watching. The next minutes unfolded in pure instinct. Collins grabbed a pistol from the drawer and tossed another to William. We go out the back. Keep low. They slipped through the rear door as the SUV doors opened. 2 men in tactical coats stepped out, moving with precision. One carried a suppressed rifle. William crouched behind a stack of pallets. Duke pressed to his leg, muscles taut. Snow crunched. Too close. Collins whispered, We split up. Meet at Maggie's house. If I don't make it, you'll make it. Gunfire erupted, muffled but deadly. Bullets splintered wood. William fired back once, aiming low. 1 man fell. The other ducked behind the SUV. Move! Collins shouted, sprinting toward the fence. William followed, heart hammering. Duke darted ahead, agile and silent. A bullet grazed William's shoulder, but he kept running. They scaled the fence and dropped into an alley behind the yard. A siren wailed somewhere distant. The city swallowed them. When they finally reached the cover of an underpass, Collins doubled over, coughing. Blood spotted his coat. You hit? William asked. Just a graze, Collins lied, clutching his side. William pulled the flash drive from the case and handed it to him. Take this. If they find me. Collins shook his head. No. You've already lost enough. Finish it, Hayes. He pressed the drive back into William's palm. Langley believed the truth was worth dying for. Prove him right. Then he stumbled into the dark before William could stop him. Duke barked once, the sound echoing under the bridge. William looked down at the flash drive, the cold metal biting into his hand. In that instant, he understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. He turned toward the city lights. "Come on, boy," he murmured. "We've got work to do." Snow hammered the city that night, erasing tracks and muffling sound. William moved through it like a silhouette, Duke trotting close beside him. The black metal case was gone. All that remained was the flash drive, tucked deep in his jacket's inner pocket. Every step felt heavier. Colin's words replayed in his head. "The moment that box opens, someone out there will know." He reached Maggie Riley's house near midnight. Her porch light flickered weakly. When she opened the door, her expression shifted from relief to fear. "Jesus, William, you're bleeding." "It's nothing," he muttered, brushing past her. "We've got bigger problems." Duke padded in, shaking off snow. William dropped the duffel bag on the table, unzipped it, and revealed the flash drive. "This is what they killed Langley for," he said. Maggie hesitated, staring at it as if it were alive. "And now they'll come for you." "They already did." He filled her in. Collins, the freight yard, the ambush. Her face paled. When he mentioned Collins splitting off, her hand went to her mouth. "You think he made it out?" William didn't answer. The silence said everything. Maggie exhaled shakily. "So what now? You can't go to the police. They'll bury it again. You can't go to the press. They'll discredit you." "There's one person left," William said. "Mac Riley." Maggie frowned. "Riley? The ex-FBI agent?" Dean trusted him. "Yeah. He left the bureau after they silenced Langley's case. If anyone knows how to use this, it's him." The next morning, they found Riley's office above an old boxing gym. The man was older now, grayer, thicker, but with eyes still sharp enough to slice through lies. He studied William for a long moment before speaking. "You shouldn't have come here." William placed the flash drive on his desk. "You used to work this case." Riley didn't touch it. "That case destroyed careers. Langley, Dean Riley, you, and me." He looked at William's hands. "You still shake when you talk about it?" William's jaw tightened. "You know I do." Riley sighed. "Then walk away. I buried this once to keep breathing. Then you already know what's on it." The older man rubbed his face, torn between self-preservation and conscience. Finally, he plugged the drive into his computer. Lines of encrypted files flashed across the screen: transaction records, voice logs, photographs. He clicked open an audio file labeled Op Helios Debrief. Langley's voice filled the room, clear and calm even in death. "Black Arrow Logistics has compromised the chain of command. Evidence of illegal weapons transfers attached. If this recording is heard, I am either dead or silenced." The recording ended. Riley leaned back, pale. "This is enough to bury them all. But it'll bury us too." Maggie's voice trembled. "They've already buried too many." William leaned forward. "You can help me leak it anonymously." Riley hesitated. "Maybe. But they'll trace the upload, follow the signal. You'd need a blind drop, someone outside the grid." "Someone like a journalist?" Riley nodded reluctantly. "I know one. Jake Miller, the Ledger. He's fearless but reckless. You'll need protection." He glanced at Duke. "Guess you already have that." That night, they met Jake Miller at a diner near the river. The reporter was in his 30s, unshaven, wearing the kind of expression that said he'd stopped believing in heroes a long time ago. He listened as William explained everything: the letter, the storage unit, Collins, the case. When it was over, Jake leaned back, whistling softly. You're talking about top-tier government contractors, Hayes. If I touch this, I'm a dead man walking. Then don't do it for you, William said quietly. Do it for them. He slid a photo across the table. Langley and the squad before the ambush, 7 men who believed in something once. Jake's eyes lingered on the faces. He exhaled through his nose. Send me the files. I'll vet them first. If it's real, I'll run it. Before William could thank him, Duke lifted his head and growled low. Outside the window, a black sedan rolled slowly down the street, its headlights off. Jake noticed too. They're watching you already, aren't they? William didn't answer. Send the story fast. By dawn, the city stirred to life again. Maggie insisted William stay hidden in her basement until Jake confirmed the upload. But William couldn't sit still. Every creak of the floorboards made his muscles tighten. When Jake finally called, his voice was grim. I've got good news and bad. The files check out. The bad news is someone hacked my system an hour ago. They know what I'm holding. How long do we have? Minutes. William grabbed his coat. Maggie, get to the back room. Now. The words had barely left his mouth before the front door exploded inward. 2 armed men stormed through, faces masked, movements precise. Duke lunged first, a blur of fur and fury, knocking one attacker off balance. William tackled the other, grabbing for his weapon. A shot fired. Drywall burst beside his head. Maggie screamed. William disarmed the man and struck hard, adrenaline driving every move. Duke bit down on the second assailant's arm, forcing him to drop his gun. The man kicked free and fled through the kitchen window, blood trailing in the snow. The second one followed, stumbling into the storm. The silence afterward was deafening. Maggie clutched the door frame, shaking. William. He checked Duke. No wounds, just a few scratches. We need to move. To where? Riley's office. He'll know what to do. They drove through the storm, the road slick and empty. William's mind churned. Every choice he'd made since opening that wall had led here, to chaos, to blood, to another fight he hadn't wanted but couldn't avoid. When they reached the gym, the front door was ajar. Inside, Riley's office was wrecked, papers scattered, computer smashed, chair overturned. Maggie gasped. Oh my God! On the floor, written in red spray paint across the wall, were 2 words. Stop digging. William's chest tightened. He picked up a piece of the broken monitor and saw the reflection of Duke beside him, ears down, eyes alert. They're cleaning house again, he said. Maggie looked at him. Then what do we do? He turned toward her, eyes burning with resolve. We finish what Langley started. That night, he found an abandoned warehouse on the city's edge, a relic from the steel era. It was empty except for echoes and shadows. He set up an old laptop Riley had once used for offline ops. Duke lay nearby, restless. William inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered to life. The files began uploading to a dark web archive. Slow, irreversible. Snow blew in through broken windows, settling on the keys. William's reflection stared back at him from the cracked monitor, older and tired, but no longer lost. Then the sound came, distant engines, drawing closer. He smiled faintly. Guess they found us again, Duke. The dog growled, ready. William watched the progress bar climb. 78%, 84%, 92%. Almost there. The warehouse doors slammed open. Black Arrow agents poured in, shouting commands. William grabbed his pistol, took cover behind a column. Gunfire erupted, sparks flying from metal. The upload reached 99%. He drew in a breath, steady as the soldier he once was, and whispered, "Do your worst." Bullets ripped through the warehouse walls, splintering steel and stone. The air filled with the hiss of ricochets and the smell of gunpowder. Duke barked once, a deep, thunderous sound that echoed through the rafters, and William moved with practiced calm. Years of combat training came flooding back, muscle memory overriding fear. He dropped low, fired twice toward the shadows, and saw one figure fall. Another flash of muzzle fire answered. Shards of concrete sliced across his cheek. The upload bar flickered at 99%. 100%. The screen flashed. Transfer complete. File secured. William almost laughed. The truth was out. But victory was only seconds old when the laptop exploded in a spray of sparks, the power line severed by a bullet. The drive, still in the port, flew across the floor. A man stepped through the smoke. Tall, lean, wearing a black trench coat. His voice was cool, almost polite. "Sergeant Hayes, you just made yourself a very expensive problem." William raised his weapon. "You're late." The man smirked. "Names don't matter. Let's just say I represent interests that prefer silence." He motioned to the two operatives flanking him. "Search him." Before they could move, Duke lunged, teeth sinking into one man's arm. The second agent fired. The sound thundered through the hollow space. Duke yelped but didn't release his grip. William's vision tunneled red. He fired 3 times. Clean, controlled. The agent dropped. The man in the trench coat didn't flinch. "You can't save a world that's already sold, soldier." William's voice was raw. "Maybe not. But I can make it listen." He hurled himself forward, tackling the man into a stack of crates. They crashed to the floor, fists and rage colliding. The fight was brutal and close. Grunts, bone, breath, the scrape of boots on concrete. The man drew a knife. William caught his wrist, forcing the blade back toward his throat. For a moment they were frozen, two ghosts of different wars locked in one heartbeat of choice. Then William twisted, the knife clattered away, and the man went still. Silence. Only the hiss of wind through broken windows. William stumbled toward Duke. The dog lay breathing, wounded but alive. He pressed a hand to the animal's side. "Stay with me, boy. We're almost there." From the floor nearby, the flash drive blinked faintly, its small indicator light still pulsing. William pocketed it, grabbed Duke's leash, and limped toward the back exit. Outside, dawn bled into the horizon, pink against the soot-gray sky. Sirens wailed in the distance. William looked back once at the warehouse, at the smoke curling upward like ghosts escaping the past. He whispered to no one, "Langley, it's done." 3 hours later, the world changed. Across morning broadcasts and social feeds, encrypted leaks under the name Operation Helios flooded every network. Contracts, audio files, and payment trails tied Black Arrow logistics to illegal arms sales and falsified military deaths. The whistleblower was anonymous, but the name Captain Arthur Langley trended worldwide. Riley's old bureau contacts confirmed the authenticity within hours. Congress called emergency hearings. William watched it all unfold from the shadows of a city park, Duke resting against his leg, bandaged and weary. He should have felt triumph. Instead, He felt hollow. The truth was out, yes, but the cost was written in blood. Footsteps approached. Maggie. Her coat whipped in the wind, her face pale but alive. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it." She knelt beside Duke, running her hand through his fur. "He's going to be okay." William nodded, though his own wound still bled under the jacket. "Doesn't feel like victory." Maggie looked toward the skyline. Maybe justice never does. But Dean would be proud. William's eyes glistened. Langley too. She studied him. "What will you do now?" He looked down at Duke, then at the sun breaking through the clouds. "Find a way to live with it. Maybe that's enough." For the first time in years, his shoulders eased. The war, this war, was over. He handed Maggie the flash drive. "Keep it safe. Someone will try to rewrite the story." "What about you?" He smiled faintly. "I've been rewritten enough." The camera would linger on William and Duke walking toward the bridge, the same one where he'd once slept beneath the girders. Snow still fell, but softer now, like forgiveness. He paused halfway across, looking down at the river. The city lights shimmered on the surface, rippling gold and silver. Duke pressed against his leg. William murmured, "We made it, partner." Then he tossed his blood-stained dog tag into the current. The metal spun once in the air, caught the first light of morning, and vanished beneath the water. That was the turn, the death of the man he'd been, the birth of whoever he might become. The snow had melted into dirty slush by the time the city learned his name again. Headlines blared across Pittsburgh. Black Arrow collapses. Federal indictments issued. But William Hayes didn't see the cameras or the journalists. He was holed up in a veterans' rehabilitation ward, bandaged shoulder pressed against starched sheets, Duke sleeping at his bedside. Hospitals had always made him uneasy. The smell of antiseptic reminded him of field tents, of wounded men gasping in sand and dust. He stared at the ceiling's dull fluorescence and tried not to think about how many times he'd woken up like this before, alive, but wondering if it mattered. Maggie visited daily. She brought newspapers and bad coffee, always pretending she hadn't been crying. "You should read what they're saying," she told him one morning, dropping a folded article on his tray. He glanced at the headline, "Whistleblower Hero Brings Down Defense Giant." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Hero, huh? Guess they ran out of real ones." She sat down beside the bed. "You did what no one else would. Langley's name is clean. Dean's too. That's not nothing." William shifted, wincing. "Tell that to Collins." Maggie looked down. Collins' body had been found 3 days earlier near the freight yard. Gunshot wound, untraceable weapon. Officially, gang-related. William knew better. "He made his choice," she said softly. "So did I." Duke stirred, ears twitching. William reached down and scratched behind the dog's neck, feeling the scar under the fur where the bullet had grazed. "He almost didn't make it." Maggie smiled faintly. "He's tougher than you think. You both are." He studied her for a long moment. There was warmth in her eyes. Real, unguarded. It scared him more than gunfire ever had. That night, sleep refused him. Every time he closed his eyes, the images came back. The muzzle flashes, the warehouse smoke, the sound of Duke's cry. He sat up, breathing hard, sweat slick on his chest despite the cold. "Easy, partner," he whispered, running his hand through Duke's fur. The dog raised his head, pressing against William's side as if to ground him in the present. The window overlooked the river. From here, the city looked peaceful, bridges glowing gold in the moonlight, water dark and endless. Somewhere out there, people were moving on, eating dinner, laughing, living. He envied them. He thought about the tag he'd thrown into that same river, how the current had taken it without hesitation. A part of him wished it had taken him, too. 2 weeks later, he was discharged with a clean bill of health and nowhere to go. The ward's social worker offered temporary housing through a non-profit. William thanked her but declined. "I've got Duke," he said simply. "We'll manage." He didn't know where he was heading until he found himself standing in front of the same storage facility where it all began. The metal doors lined the corridor like tombstones. He walked to Unit 27, the one that had cost him his last $60, and rested his hand on the cold latch. The manager appeared, surprised to see him. "You, Hayes? Thought you'd disappeared." "Guess not. Police came by asking questions a while back. Wanted to know if you'd been snooping around here again." William's brow furrowed. "Why?" The man shrugged, said they were cleaning up loose ends. But they didn't find anything. Whatever was in there, it's long gone. William looked at the empty concrete floor inside. The hidden wall had been repaired, fresh plywood nailed over it. No trace of what had started this journey remained. He smiled bitterly. "Yeah, long gone." Duke sniffed the corners, tail low, as if remembering the scent of the past. William crouched beside him. "You found it, buddy. Guess that's what matters." He stood there for a long time, the echoes of that first day swirling around him, the hopelessness, the exhaustion, the miracle buried behind rotten wood. Everything had changed in that moment, even if the world would never fully understand. Later that afternoon, he visited Langley's grave. The cemetery was quiet, rows of marble catching the last light of dusk. He laid a folded American flag across the headstone and a dog tag he'd kept from one of their fallen men. "Your name's clean now," William said softly. "I wish that fixed everything." Duke sat beside him, silent and still. "You were right all along. About truth. About cost." He swallowed hard. "Guess I finally paid mine." The wind carried his words away. He closed his eyes and let the silence settle, heavy but strangely peaceful. Back in the city, Maggie opened her door before he could knock. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," he said simply. She stepped aside to let him in. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The smell of stew filled the small kitchen. It reminded him of the meals he'd missed, of the life he'd almost forgotten existed. He sat at the table, awkward at first, until Duke flopped down beside his chair with a sigh. Maggie poured him a bowl. "What will you do now?" "Not sure." He took a bite, the warmth spreading through him like memory. "Maybe something quiet. Something honest." She smiled. "That sounds nice." He looked around her home, the photos, the light, the simple peace, and realized how foreign comfort felt. For so long, he'd survived on adrenaline and guilt. Now, in the soft glow of Maggie's kitchen, he finally allowed himself to breathe. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time, no longer threatening. The world kept turning, uncaring but alive. William glanced at Duke, then at Maggie. "Feels strange, doesn't it? When the fight's finally over." Maggie met his eyes. "Sometimes the fight's what keeps us alive." He nodded, understanding. "Maybe. But maybe it's also what keeps us from living." That night, after she'd gone to bed, William stepped outside into the cold. The street was quiet, lined with frost-tipped trees. He could hear the faint hum of the river in the distance. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You did good, Hayes." It wasn't pride, just acceptance. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Duke pressed against his leg, the steady weight of loyalty anchoring him to the earth. William looked down, smiling faintly. "Come on, boy. Let's go home." They walked together into the snowfall. No mission, no orders, just the long quiet of peace slowly returning. The days that followed were quieter than any William had known in years. He rented a small room above a mechanic's shop on Carson Street. The walls shook when the trains passed, but he didn't mind. After years of sleeping in alleys and under bridges, the rattle felt like proof he was still here. Each morning, he'd take Duke for long walks along the Monongahela River. The city moved around them, buses, bridges, businessmen, but he walked at his own pace, slow and deliberate. For once, there was nowhere he had to be. He still carried the letter from Captain Langley, folded and creased from use. Some nights, he would read it again, not for clues, but for clarity. The words no longer hurt, they guided. "If you are reading this, then I am gone. What you hold here is the truth that cost my brother his life." At first, he thought Langley meant literal truth. Names, dates, evidence. But now, in the stillness, William began to see it differently. Langley hadn't been warning him what to find. He'd been reminding him why to look at all. The truth wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering who you were before the lies. One morning, Maggie visited with coffee and a stack of letters. "You've been getting mail," she said, smiling. "Mail? I don't even have an address." "Apparently, you do now." The letters were from soldiers' families, wives, sons, brothers of men from his old unit. Some were simple thank yous. Others were heavier. Apologies, confessions, stories of grief, finally finding closure. William read each one carefully, as if touching fragile things that had waited too long to be held. One envelope bore a return address he didn't recognize, Evan Langley, Denver, Colorado. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten and clean. "Mr. Hayes, my father never spoke much about the men he served with. But after your story aired, I found his journals. He wrote about you. Said you were the only one who still believed in him when everything fell apart. Thank you for giving me back a piece of who he was. Evan Langley." William folded the letter with trembling hands. His throat ached, but it wasn't sorrow this time. It was released. Maggie watched him. "You okay?" He nodded, voice low. "Better than I've been in a long time." Later that afternoon, he walked back to the warehouse district where everything had ended. The police tape was gone. The charred skeleton of the building stood empty. He stepped inside, Duke following close. Dust floated in the shafts of light breaking through the roof. William stopped where the laptop had burned out, where the smoke had once filled his lungs. The floor was scorched but still intact, a blackened scar across the concrete. He crouched, brushing away a layer of ash until a small glint caught his eye. Buried there, half melted, was a fragment of metal, the corner of the flash drive. The files had already changed the world. The physical proof meant nothing now. Yet he picked it up, turning it over in his palm. He whispered, "Guess this is all that's left." Duke nuzzled his hand, whimpering softly. "No, boy. You're right. This isn't the end. Just what's left behind." He slipped the fragment into his pocket, a keepsake not of pain, but of purpose. As weeks turned to months, The chaos faded from the headlines. Black Arrow's executives were indicted. Names changed. Agencies restructured. But the system kept turning. William didn't expect the world to stay clean. It never did. What mattered was that truth, once spoken, couldn't be buried again. He took a job helping at a veteran outreach center downtown, the same one where he'd first searched for Collins. The woman at the desk, the one with sharp eyes and gray hair, smiled when she saw him return. "Decided to stop running?" she asked. "Decided to start helping," he replied. He fixed leaking pipes, built shelves, and walked other lost soldiers through paperwork they didn't understand. Some days, he told them nothing about who he was. Other days, when they asked about the scars, he just said, "A long story. But it ends okay." Every time he said that, he meant it a little more. One afternoon, he caught his reflection in the center's glass door. Older, yes, but not the hollow-eyed man who'd sat in that freezing storage unit months ago. There was life behind his eyes now, even humor. Duke's reflection sat beside his, tongue lolling, tail flicking lazily. "Not bad, huh?" William murmured. Duke barked once, approval in canine form. That night, as the sun sank over the river, he returned to the bridge, the same one from Act Two's turning point. He leaned on the railing, looking down at the water gliding beneath. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small wooden box, the one he'd first found behind the false wall. Inside were Langley's faded photos, now restored and laminated. He placed one against the railing, the squad together in desert light. "They said we'd never be remembered," he said quietly. "Guess they were wrong." Duke rested his head against his leg, eyes half closed. The air smelled of snow again, but this time it didn't carry dread, it brought peace. William thought of all the years he'd spent fighting ghosts, chasing redemption like a moving target. Only now did he understand. Redemption wasn't about undoing the past. It was about learning to live with it, and choosing to do better anyway. He looked up at the fading sky, the first stars flickering to life. "You know, Langley," he whispered, "you said the truth had a cost. You were right. But maybe it was worth it." A breeze stirred, gentle and cold. The photo slipped from the railing, fluttered once, and drifted down into the river, just like his tag before it. He smiled. "Yeah, worth it." Duke barked softly, as if to agree. Spring came quietly that year. Pittsburgh's hard winter softened, the bridges glowed gold again, and the river thawed into restless motion. For the first time in a long time, William Hayes woke each morning without dread. He'd rented a modest apartment above the outreach center. Bare walls, second-hand furniture, sunlight leaking through curtains that never quite closed. It wasn't much, but it was his. Duke's bed sat by the window where the dog spent hours watching the street below, ears twitching whenever children passed. The world was moving on, and William had learned to let it. Each day began the same, a walk with Duke, coffee from the corner diner, and a few hours fixing whatever the center's creaky building demanded. In the afternoons, he sat with other vets in the common room, listening more than speaking. Some days, he saw in their eyes the same exhaustion that once lived in his. Other days, he saw sparks of hope, small and stubborn. That was enough. One Friday afternoon, Maggie arrived with a manila folder and her familiar half-smile. "You've been served," she teased, setting it on his desk. He arched an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "Not this time." Inside was a notice. Commendation for bravery and service, Department of Veterans Affairs. William laughed under his breath. "They give medals for breaking the law now?" Maggie shrugged. Sometimes justice needs a little breaking. He read the letter twice, unsure what to feel. 4 years, the system had erased him, branded him unstable, expendable. Now, the same institution was offering thanks. It felt surreal, too neat, too late, but he accepted it anyway. He placed the paper back in the folder and said quietly, "Guess they finally saw me." Maggie smiled. "We always did." That evening, they walked down to the park together. William, Maggie, and Duke padding between them. The cherry blossoms had begun to bloom, pale petals scattering in the breeze like memories trying to let go. They sat on a bench near the river. For a long time, they didn't speak. Silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. Maggie broke it first. "Do you ever think about going back?" He turned to her. "Back where?" "The army. The old life." He shook his head. "No. That chapter's closed." He watched Duke chase a drifting blossom. "But I think about what it taught me." "Which was?" "That sometimes surviving is the bravest thing you can do." She smiled. "You really believe that now?" "I have to." A breeze rippled the water. For a heartbeat, William thought he saw a reflection in it. Langley, standing tall in desert sun, nodding once in silent approval. Then it was gone, and the moment folded into peace. Weeks passed. The outreach center expanded. Donations poured in after the Operation Helios expose. William's name was never mentioned publicly, but that was fine. He preferred it that way. One afternoon, a young recruit came in, barely 20, eyes haunted by the kind of pain that aged a man too early. He sat across from William, staring at the floor. "They said you help people like me," the boy mumbled. "I try," William said. The boy swallowed. "I screwed up overseas. Lost a friend. Can't sleep. Feels like I'm dragging him around everywhere." William leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then don't drag him," he said. "Carry him until he's light enough to set down. That's what we do." The boy looked up, confused but listening. "You'll know when it's time," William added. "When the memory stops hurting and starts guiding." The boy nodded slowly. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition, shared pain, maybe even hope. As he left, Maggie appeared in the doorway, watching William. "You're good at that." "Guess I've had practice," he replied. That night, William walked the city again. It wasn't the same gray labyrinth it had once been. The alleys no longer whispered his failures. The streets no longer felt hostile. He realized with quiet amazement that he'd stopped looking over his shoulder. He reached the bridge one more time. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. The river below murmured its eternal song, steady, patient, alive. Duke sat beside him, tail brushing against his boot. William pulled a small photo from his wallet. The squad, smiling beneath the Afghan sun. He looked at it a moment, then tucked it back. He rested his hands on the railing and whispered, "We made it, brothers. Took the long way, but we made it." The wind shifted, gentle as a breath. He closed his eyes. For the first time since the war, his mind was silent. No gunfire, no orders, no ghosts. Just the hum of a city rebuilding and a man who had finally forgiven himself. When he turned to leave, the camera of this imagined film would follow him from behind. Slowly, quietly. The sun would dip below the skyline, casting long gold reflections across the bridge. Duke would glance back once, as if checking the past one last time, then trot ahead. And William Hayes, homeless veteran, forgotten soldier, reluctant hero, would disappear into the fading light, no longer running from who he was, but walking toward who he'd become. A year passed. The city changed in small, quiet ways. New storefronts, repaired bridges, the steady rhythm of people rebuilding what had been broken. For most, Operation Helios was an old headline now, folded into history. But for William Hayes, its echoes lived on, not as noise, but as purpose. The outreach center had grown, renovated with community donations. Its walls, once cracked and tired, were now bright with murals painted by veterans and local artists, scenes of unity, hope, and healing. William stood in front of one such mural that morning, a depiction of a soldier walking into light, a loyal dog beside him. Duke sat at his heel, tail gently thumping. "Not bad likeness, huh?" William said, sipping his coffee. Duke gave a short huff, like he agreed. Maggie joined him, holding a clipboard and that easy, knowing smile. "They finished it last night. Everyone wanted to surprise you." He shook his head. "You didn't have to." "We wanted to," she said. "This place exists because of you." He glanced around. The volunteers, the laughter, the scent of fresh paint and brewed coffee. "It exists because people needed it. And because you gave them permission to believe again." William looked at her, then back at the mural. The soldier's face wasn't exactly his, but the posture, weary yet upright, felt right. "I used to think belief was for the lucky ones," he said quietly. "Turns out it's for the stubborn." Maggie smiled. "Then you must have plenty." That afternoon, a storm rolled through, sudden, heavy, cleansing. Rain battered the center's windows while thunder rolled over the river. William watched it from the doorway, the smell of wet earth rising through the air. The sound transported him for a moment, back to that first night in the storage unit, when rain had dripped through the roof, cold and relentless, and he'd thought life had finally beaten him. He remembered Duke scratching at that false wall, the crack of the crowbar, the first gasp of stale air escaping from the past. That was the night everything changed. The night despair became discovery. He smiled faintly. "Funny how one choice can rewrite everything," he murmured. Maggie appeared behind him. "What's that?" He turned slightly. "Nothing. Just remembering where it started." She leaned against the doorframe beside him. "You ever wish you could forget?" He shook his head. "Not anymore. Forgetting means losing the proof that we made it through." They watched the storm together until it passed, leaving the sky washed clean and pale blue. The air smelled of newness, like the world had pressed reset. Later that evening, the center hosted its first open community night. Veterans, families, neighbors, people who'd never met before, filled the hall. There was laughter, soft music, the clink of coffee cups. William wasn't one for crowds, but he stayed near the back, watching. Duke sat content by his feet, a living guardian of calm. One of the young volunteers, a boy not much older than 20, stepped up to the small stage. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. "This center saved my life," he said. "I don't know who started it, but whoever you are, thank you." Applause followed. Maggie looked at William. He pretended to study the floor, cheeks coloring just slightly. "You could tell them," she whispered. He smiled. "They don't need to know. They just need to believe it can be done." That was enough. When the night wound down, William locked the doors, the quiet settling like an old friend. The room smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Duke padded beside him as he walked through the darkened hall, checking lights. He stopped at the mural again. The painted soldier stood beneath a beam of light, his hand resting on his dog's head. Beneath it, someone had added a line of text in small, careful letters. "Greatness demands sacrifice." William read it twice, his throat tightening. It wasn't hero worship. It was truth. Quiet, earned truth. He reached out, brushing a hand across the painted surface. "Guess we learned that the hard way, huh, partner?" Duke looked up at him with tired, gentle eyes. William crouched, resting a hand on the dog's back. "You never left my side. Not once." The dog licked his hand. It was answer enough. Outside, the night was clear. The streets glistened with rain, neon lights reflecting in puddles like shifting galaxies. William stepped out into the cool air, Duke following close. Across the street, he saw his own reflection faintly mirrored in the window. An older man, scarred but steady. A survivor. He thought back to every version of himself he'd been. The soldier, the runaway, the ghost in the storage unit. All of them were still there, woven into the same skin. But for the first time, they didn't feel like enemies. They felt like chapters. He took a slow breath, looked up at the stars breaking through cloud cover, and whispered, "We made it home." Duke barked once, softly, and together they walked down the empty street. As they disappeared into the glow of a street lamp, the camera of this imagined film would rise, catching the reflection of water on the asphalt, rippling gold and white, echoing the river from Act 1. The same light, but a different man. The story ends where it began, with a man, his dog, and a storage unit's echo, but this time the emptiness is filled with meaning. In the background, William's voice would linger, steady and warm. Sometimes, we spend our whole lives digging through what's broken, thinking we're chasing the past. But maybe we're just trying to find the piece of ourselves we buried there. And if we're lucky, we do.